Every business operates under a legal structure, whether the owner realizes it or not. That structure determines how risk is handled, how ownership works, and how the business grows over time. But most people who start businesses don't fully understand that part. So today I want to talk about how to decide the right business structure. And before we get into it, here's what we're going to cover. I want to walk through three things that help you determine the right business structure for almost every business: risk, ownership, and growth. And if you understand these three things, choosing a structure becomes much clearer. Good morning and welcome back to the SBS podcast. I'm Coach Ryan. You can follow me on Instagram and YouTube at Ryan at Strategics. Yesterday, we talked about the different types of entities: sole proprietorships, partnerships, LLCs, and corporations. But knowing the names of the structures is only part of the conversation. Because the real question entrepreneurs face is, how do I decide which one makes sense for my business? And most of the time, that decision comes down to three things: risk, ownership, and growth. We're going to take it piece by piece and talk about each one. The first is risk. Every business carries some level of risk. Some businesses carry very little risk. Others carry quite a bit. For example, imagine running a consulting business. They may advise companies. They might design websites. They might even help with bookkeeping. In situations like that, the risk exposure is relatively small. But compared it to somewhere like a company like a restaurant, they have employees, customers walking in every day, food safety, equipment, physical space. There's a completely different level of responsibility there. And as that risk increases, business owners usually start looking for liability protection. And that's where structures like LLCs become useful. An LLC creates separation between the owner and the business. Now the business becomes its own legal entity. And that kind of sounds strange at first, but legally speaking, the business can own things, owe things, and operate independently from the owner. That separation helps protect personal assets if something goes wrong. The second factor is ownership. Some businesses are very simple. They may have one person that came up with one idea. They have one bank account and they're the only person doing the work. But once another person enters that picture, things can change. Maybe you and a homie decide to start a business together. One of you all handle the operations, the other person that does the marketing. That sounds great in the beginning until one of you is working 70 hours and the other's working 15. That's where your conversations are going to start getting interesting. And when I say interesting, I mean uncomfortable. Business structures help you define those relationships. They're going to answer questions like who owns what, who makes decisions, how are the profits divided, and what happens if one of us decides to leave. Because if those questions cannot be answered early, they usually get answered later during an argument, and that's not the ideal time to figure this stuff out. The third factor is growth. What do you actually want your business to become? Some businesses are actually meant to stay small: a consulting practice, a freelance service, a local company. And that's perfectly fine. Not every business needs to become a global corporation, but some businesses are built with growth in mind: hiring employees, opening additional locations, bringing in investors, and even expanding into new markets. When growth becomes a part of the plan, the structure often needs to support that, because certain structures make it easier to raise capital and scale operations. Now, if you're starting your first real business, personally, I recommend that you start with the LLC structure. And it's not just because of the liability protection, but it's because it teaches you something very important. Operating an LLC forces you to think differently. Okay. You stop thinking only as a person and you start thinking as someone earning personal income. You start thinking as someone who's operating a business entity. You separate your personal money away from your business money. You track revenue and expenses properly. You begin making decisions based on what's best for the business itself. In many ways, an LLC can become a training ground for entrepreneurs. It's been mine for the last decade. It gives people real experience learning how to operate a business. Here's something that I need everybody to understand, though. Businesses do evolve. The structure that you start with is not always the structure that you keep. Someone might start alone, later bring in partners, later expand the company. And that structure most times will and can evolve with the business. So the goal at the beginning is not perfection, it's alignment. Your structure should match the current stage of your business, not the fantasy version, the real one. So if you're thinking about starting a business, here's the real question to consider. And it's not just, what business should I start? But ask yourself, what structure fits the entity of my business right now? Because good ideas start businesses, but good structure helps them last. Take that time and re-listen to this. Because I think right now we live in a culture where everybody turns on Instagram or turns on YouTube and they find some person who claims that they know what they're talking about as it relates to business and structure. And they very well could be right in some instances. But as I told you yesterday, don't overthink this thing. The idea is cool. Operations are cool. But your structure matters to protect yourself. Until next time, y'all have a great day.
I'm feeling better than ever. Scratch that. Better than better. Only live once. Can't be me. I'm living forever. Turn up the bass. I stay out of trouble. I'm walking with God and stomp on the devil. I had to follow the plan when I did not understand. Now I just feel like the man. Watch how I'm doing my dance. Bigger than me with your brand. All that I need is a chance. I pray that we'll see promised land. I know that